What do you think matters more towards achieving success? Motivation or determination? One of the main questions I was asked back when I worked as a productivity coach was, how do I motivate myself to do the things I'm supposed to be doing for my business, to stop procrastinating, to remain consistent? Countless tools and methodologies got developed as a result of the need of people to achieve that spring out of bed and attain success feeling. And I couldn't tell you how many times, despite all of them, people quickly came back to their old ways because the motivation they've had just wasn't consistent. It wasn't constant. It was fleeting. So is motivation really the factor behind success of the richest? Or maybe it's something completely different, something mundane, something simpler, like determination. And if so, what is determination? Well, I'll be discussing this with my guest today, Louie Slade, a successful tradesman and director of a real estate company called Slade Estates Limited, director of an export business for luxury cars, a dear friend of mine, and a person I had the absolute pleasure and honor of working with back in the day. Louie is an amazing guy. He's the perfect guy for this chat, as you will find out, due to his sheer determination to make things work, but especially because of incredible focus and work ethic. Despite having limited time, bear in mind, managing several companies at once, he is the sheer epitome of what it means to roll up your sleeves and go out there to get what you want. He is also the success story you can have, where in just a few short years, his life has changed a full 360, as it can for you. If you just stop relying on motivation alone and start understanding the work principles you're about to listen to in this episode. So without further ado, let's get into this week's Habits of Influence, where we discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly sides of entrepreneurship and building a movement. Louie, it's so fun to see you again. Thanks for agreeing to be part of the podcast.
Excellent. Well, thank you for having me, mate. It's a pleasure. Nice to see you too.
Absolute pleasure. Since we've last seen each other, a lot of stuff has changed in your business, like consolidating your businesses under one umbrella or going into real estate. And Guy, we both know that running a business requires multiple moving parts, right? But running multiple at the same time is like a whole new game. So if you could tell the people listening to our podcast, based on your experience, what are the main challenges a multi-business owner may face that solopreneurs just don't have to think about or don't think about in a normal manner?
Well, where do we even begin? So I very much agree. There's lots of moving parts, of course. Multiple sources of income is something that we all strive for. It's really something that I believe we have to achieve the levels of wealth and cash flow that we all want, but it's very, very difficult. And for me, I've realized that the way to go through this process is really what's most important. Trying to build multiple companies from the ground up doesn't work. It's very, very rarely will you see someone do that successfully. If they are doing it successfully, that's incredible, but they're probably going to be very stressed, probably even unhappy. Even if the cash flow is there, it's not a nice position to be in. And I've learned this firsthand. I've really struggled at times trying to sort of do multiple things. And it's easy as an entrepreneur, and I'm sure lots of you watching this will probably agree. You find new ideas, you get excited with new ideas, you realize how you can monetize, and you don't want to leave money on the table, but at the same time, it's really all about focusing on one particular thing to build that up to a point where you can either systemize it, maybe even sell it if you're not the face of it, hire staff, outsource things, get something so it's cash flowing really, really well. Then you can start to think about building something up as well. And if you're trying to do all this on multiple different planes at the same time from scratch, then it's most likely going to fail. I don't want to be negative, but it's just so challenging. So I think for me and for most people, the challenge is always time, how to manage those activities, and especially if they're in different sectors and industries, it's even more challenging because they're not even loosely related, so that you can split your time more effectively. But even if they were, splitting your time it just doesn't work. You need to be laser focused just to make things work, and then you can always expand.
Right. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And you said something very important, which I absolutely love. And that revolves around, there are people who might be very successful and earning a lot of money, but they might not necessarily be very happy, or they might be overwhelmed or stressed in their doings. And I remember, when I first met you, when we've actually met for the first time, you were in a position where you were running multiple projects and you were extremely stressed, weren't you? There was certain organizational parts that needed to change a little bit in order for you to work better, more efficiently, and just to essentially to be a happier person, right? You didn't have time for anything outside of work, as far as I remember. What I would like to know is, because I have watched you grow and evolve and your journey, what was the best decision that you've made that you think impacted, first of all, your success and the levels of success you have right now? We're talking about, deals. You cover deals of multiple 6 and 7 figures sometimes. What was that massive change in your behavior, your thinking, that impacted your success the most, and what has made a difference?
Okay, and yeah, I mean, I can speak confidently from this because that you're right, that was me. Very upset, very sad, very stressed, making money but not particularly happy at all, doing things that I didn't enjoy in the end, because that's sort of the path that I was leading myself down. I think in terms of actually moving forward and changing the dynamic of everything, changing the paradigm, if you will, is just making that decision to really consolidate and to focus on one thing. So there's been several times where I've sort of walked away from a business, taking a massive drop in income to start something new, as opposed to trying to drag the other thing along with it, because again, I've learned that that's not the way forward. Excuse me. But yeah, realistically, it's just for me consolidating and focusing on one thing, which is recently the property business. Everything else got left aside. The exporting company, in fact, even has been systemized to the point where my profit has, my personal earnings have reduced, but so too as the amount of time and effort I put in. I have someone in Germany who does a very, very good job, Isabel, out in Hamburg, does most of the running for it. In return, I take a little bit less myself, but I don't stress, I don't worry. It just, things just get done. And I've been being able to delegate and being able to, take a bit of a hit on what you're earning, if that's the case, it is for me. It's just been invaluable, because it allows me to put more time into the business I actually want to focus on, more time into actually being happy, seeing my family. And that's been really, really good. I mean, even recently, I've started sleeping 7-8 hours a night, which is unheard of. I haven't done that in the decade that I've had businesses. So that helps a lot as well. When you haven't got all these moving parts and things to juggle and things to think about, then it becomes a lot easier just to focus on one thing and actually move that forward.
Absolutely. And simplification is the best thing you can do as a business owner. A lot of people overcomplicate the process. They overcomplicate the systems. They overcomplicate what they are thinking they need to be doing in their business, which is usually not the case, right? A lot of the things can be done by other people. What we should value the most is our time. And you rightfully said, like, wow, you're sleeping 7-8 hours a night, which is the normal thing for normal people usually, but for us entrepreneurs it's not necessarily the case. Everybody's talking about the freedom, the wow, I'm just going to sit with my laptop by the beach and do nothing, and the business is just going to run itself, which is not the case. And a lot of the times we don't have the luxury to just leave our business aside and relax, because we're constantly in it, in our mind frame. What I wanted to ask you, Louie, is, we know that people rely on motivation quite a lot, don't they? We're thinking that there is some magical method or a magical tool that is going to make us want to do all those things, even though it is so difficult, even though it is so straining, even though it requires so much of our attention. But unfortunately, motivation is something that is fleeting. It's something that is not constant. It's something that we need to either constantly reinstate or rely on different things. Because your life changed in such a wonderful way, I know for a fact it is because of your mindset. And You know, this is something that we talk about a lot on the podcast, is what are those habits that rich and successful people have or must have in order to get themselves out there and just essentially do the things. So what would you say, what would you pinpoint are the most important habits that you have right now that you didn't necessarily have before and that have changed the game for you completely?
Yeah, great question. So obviously we covered a lot of mindset training when we worked together, which is obviously very helpful. I study a lot of Bob Proctor's work as well. So there's lots of different things you can do in the morning, and you're right from the intro when you said that there's a lot of things that probably people do that maybe isn't relevant, or maybe people spend too much time on habits to prep for the day instead of just getting into work. But at the same time, getting straight into work is perhaps not the best way to start your day and prime yourself. So over years, I've sort of developed my own morning routine, if you want to call it that, on how to get going. But to begin with, for me, the motivation is your why, it's your purpose, it's your reason for wanting to do everything, because that's the baseline. And there will be days where you're not as motivated. That's completely normal because we're all human. But it just takes to remember that why. I mean, I've got personal whys. I can happily share those perhaps later on. But if I do have a bad day, or if I have a lot of setbacks or things don't go wrong, and I just think back to those whys, the reason why I'm doing this, and then I can just quickly get back into that mindset. But to begin with, I write down the things that I'm grateful for in the morning. I take some time to be grateful for everything. I really feel that. I do a visualization practice as well, but only for 7 minutes. I'm going to spend half an hour meditating before the start of the day, because there's business to get done at the end of the day. But essentially, I still do start my morning with, it's probably about 15 minutes, really, just to get into that mindset. The mindset's there, but just to get into that feeling, that vibration, ready for the day. And then I can really get started and just start cracking on and really sort of start attracting things to me. And it really works. When you don't do that, I find that I might still get things done, but it might be perhaps a bit more challenging, or it might be more hurdles to overcome. And when I do this practice every single morning, I start to find things flow a bit better, and a no might become a yes, or something that really difficult might actually have been a lot smoother to do that. So yeah, I just bottle it down now to 15 minutes, just to really get myself in that vibration. I think that's the key word. I won't spend half hour, 45 minutes meditating and doing all this stuff that I used to do. And at the same time, I won't get up and go straight into my laptop and start moving forward, because I think they're two extremes. But this is just what I've done over many years. There's times where I was doing both of those, and they were successful times to an extent, but you need to also think not just of the results, but of how you feel throughout the day as well. Because when you're too tied up in work or too tied up in business, it shows, it stresses you out, it causes harm to people around you. And that's really, for me, that's when I started to realize actually something needs to change. So yeah, a very brief 15-minute preparation for the day. And that just sets me really, really well just to go and get done what needs to be done.
Fantastic. What you're describing here is what we would call an intrinsic motivation, right? This is something I've actually had a wonderful guest, Lisa Schermerhorn. She's a multi-awarded author of multiple books, and she is a why coach as well. She puts a lot of emphasis on why it's important to have a why in the process, because money is just going to get us so far, right? Even the passion towards what we're doing is going to get us so far, because like you said, there's going to be days where you just wake up and you just don't feel like doing absolutely anything. And those situations sometimes revolve around challenges or where something goes wrong. I don't know if you would agree with me, but attitude is a very important component of how you're going to deal with those particular situations. But I would like to know your opinion. What is it that you do, or how do you approach situations that are challenging or that are not necessarily working to your advantage? How do you deal with the stress, the overwhelm, and how do you overcome this?
Again, great question. So first of all, I've sort of trained myself over many years to look for the positive in any setbacks. That's almost become like a reflex now. So no longer do I have to physically think, oh, what could be the upside to this? It's just, it comes really quite quickly. I'll spot something that perhaps this has happened for a reason because I need to think about this different strategy, or I need to perhaps adapt and move forward. So I'm always thinking that way. That's like I said, it's like a reflex now. I can then be grateful for that setback, as silly as it sounds, and just knowing that if I choose that I want to achieve something, and then it's already done. And the same is true for anybody. Once you've thought it, you've really got it. So it's just a matter of moving forward, keep on taking action, and essentially not giving up. As soon as you give up, you've lost it. So why would you want to do that? It doesn't make sense. And whatever the challenge is, like I said, you find the positive, you start to analyze it a bit further, and just knowing that on the other side of that challenge is the next step forward. Just having that faith that that is the case is what really gets me through the challenges. And it just means, it just invokes deeper thought, or more specific, more thorough action. That's all it is. And I think also just the knowledge that setbacks are a part of the process. If there were no setbacks, if you're happy all the time, you wouldn't even know it. So it's just, that is just life, really. And I just don't see the point in stopping or holding back when that is just a part of the journey, that we've all chosen to do what it is that we want to do. The setbacks are there, they're part of it, so you just deal with them. It really is simple. And perhaps that's the old school bricklayer in me, that sort of attitude. You just deal with it. It's something, it really is just that simple. If you want to achieve something, then you just deal with whatever's in front of you. That's the simplest way to put it, really.
That's wonderful, because you've actually answered my next question that I wanted to ask. Again, we're coming back to those magical things that people are looking for, right? What is that one thing that I can do to get myself out of a slump? What is that one thing that I can do to overcome my challenges? It's as simple as it gets. It's just do it. Don't overcomplicate it. Go back to that why. Go back to that reason of why you started in the first place. And sometimes you need to actually tell yourself, okay, if I don't do this, what are the consequences, right? If I just leave it hanging, what are going to be the potential pitfalls that I might come across? So yeah, just do it. It's absolutely the right approach. But I know some of our listeners are going to say, okay, it's easy for you to say that because you're a 6-7 figure business owner right now. You're very successful. You're doing exactly what you want to be doing. What would you say to those people? Is how do you start to get yourself in the mind frame of approaching things the way that you do?
Through study, I think, really is I mean, I'll give you an example. It was only 2 months ago where I was in a really bad position, actually, with the property business, because this is all relatively new for me. I only started last year. Property's not a forgiving industry. If you start to maybe make some mistakes, or if you're even just simply unlucky with some things. So I was in a bit of a rut 2 months ago, and it really just came down to, again, the why. So constantly reminding myself, why am I doing this? I'm letting myself down in this moment in time. Who else am I letting down? It's very important for me and for most people as well. And the resolution was study one of, again, Bob Proctor's material, some of the stuff that me and you covered as well, because that's really setting the mind right. For a little period, I'd stop the visualization, I'd stop the morning prep, and that actually started to change everything. So people, some people might understate the importance of this sort of stuff, but it's very, very important. And then again, the study of the property related information and the courses that I was doing, and just really re-solidifying the knowledge, because it's the knowledge that gives you the power and the confidence. And then once you gain your confidence back, you can then approach what was, I don't know, 2 months ago, a major hurdle and an absolute disaster. Once you've got that knowledge, once you've sort of reinstated that knowledge and built your confidence again, then that hurdle is just like a small little bump in the road that you can just easily navigate. So that's just do it. It's probably too vague. Yes, correct. But it all comes down to knowledge, knowledge, confidence, understanding. Once you have those things, then you can just start to move forward. It might just be that you've forgotten something, or that you need to just remember and realize how knowledgeable and powerful you are. And then you can start to move forward again.
Absolutely. And you've touched upon something extremely important that I think all successful people share, right? There comes a point where you just start appreciating the importance of progression and skills. And I know your journey, Louis, it makes so much sense of what you're doing right now in terms of your property business. But I want our listeners to also know where you've come from, kind of what this progression looked like, because you started as a bricklayer. You've also managed and directed a building company. You've been a surveyor. You have been in the property business just from a completely different side. And I know this is very valuable for you. What do you think are the most transferable skills you've gained through that progression, through that journey that you've had? And why did you choose property?
Yes, that's interesting, really. Like you said, it is, a lot of it was transferable. I'll see if I can do it in a timeline to make it a bit more sense. So bricklaying was my first ever job, which I enjoyed for 2 or 3 years until the novelty wore off, especially living in England where it rains all the time and you don't get paid. But again, really good skills. You build resilience, you build character, you're working on site. It is funny. But essentially, I needed to stop that. It was hurting my back and I didn't enjoy it anymore. Tried lots of different things. Was selling tickets for festivals. We started doing boat parties on the Thames as well. Completely unrelated. Then we're back into building again after a short space, but decided to learn plastering and roofing and carpentry, all these different things so we could build entire homes ourselves rather than just laying the bricks and moving on. So that opened up more opportunities. That's when I started my first company. So I started to learn more about business and accounts. Eventually started doing accountancy as well. Not qualified for any of this, bear in mind, but I'm experienced and I'm good. Another company where we started subcontracting as opposed to doing domestic refurbs. So the progression throughout building, sort of covering everything really. Then it was site management, project management, quantity surveying, principal designer. Pretty so many different aspects of construction, because that is where my skills and background laid. And it sort of seemed silly. It's a paradox. I was trying to get away from construction, because I thought I didn't enjoy it anymore. Then I sort of done full circle and came back around. And now with the property, which I'll get onto in a moment why I chose that, it's actually really, really beneficial. It's so beneficial because property is massively related to construction. I mean, at the moment we're looking at BRRs, buy, refurbish, refinance, where you'll buy a property for cash that's really run down, you'll spend some money on the refurb, and then you'll either flip it or you'll refinance it, rent it out, and then you own the asset, usually for free. So incredible. I didn't know that you could do that. I thought you had to sort of save up, get a deposit, very slow process, but you can turn all this around and have a house for free essentially in less than 12 months. But I've done 30, 40 refurbs with my own hands and managed projects and done the costs for it. So what is a new industry for me is actually very familiar to me, but just on a different dynamic, as opposed to doing it for clients. Now we're doing it for ourselves, which is fantastic. Also in between there, we had marketing, which is what we was doing when we were working together as well. You were really helping me out a lot with that. Obviously the exporting the Range Rovers to Egypt, which I spoke about earlier, is now systemized, so that's really, really good. I don't really have to get too involved with that. But the marketing, I spent a lot of money on training, and I thought at one point that those skills might have potentially been lost, or maybe nothing's a waste of time or money, but it was, I was thinking, well, how am I going to do this? But obviously the marketing is helping loads. I'm aggressively marketing my service accommodation units with ways that other people without that training aren't familiar with or aren't able to do, which of course gives me an advantage. And also my deal sourcing business, because I'm helping other people to source and complete their own property deals. There's a certain amount of marketing that goes into that, because investors don't just come knock on your door or give you a call randomly. So yeah, every skill is transferable. And to be fair, I've got colleagues who similar to me, they were in a band, so they built stage presence from being in a band. There's so many different advantages. So if you are looking to go into a new business, or if you have gone into a new business, it might not be obvious what skills you can transfer over, but there's always something, and there's been more than just one. You just need to sort of see how you can adapt what you really know to aid you in your new venture or your current venture. There's so many things that are transferable, even if they're not obvious at first sight.
Absolutely. And I'm a big fan of transferable skills and using your zone of genius, you're essentially something that you know very, very well, and just putting it into whatever venture you're doing. I completely agree. And it's that preparedness factor, isn't it? It's like when we were working together, I think we had those conversations a few times that you need to learn something in order to know what to pay attention to later on. Even if you outsource it to other people, even if you pay somebody to do it for you, you know whether something is working or not. So it's always, like you said, it's always valuable to know those things, because everything is transferable. That's the reality of things, especially in business, especially if you're really good at something, especially if you know what to pay attention to. This is always going to be valuable and give dividends of success at the end of the day. Right. Before we actually started the conversation, I wanted to move on now and come back to the fact that you are a multiple business owner, and the fact that a lot of people would love to. You started with the term multiple sources of income. A lot of people dream of multiple sources of income. And you said rightfully, it's not possible to start building up several things from the ground up. And in fact, you did tell me a story about what kind of pitfalls can happen, what kind of challenges can happen if you've got too much and you're not really managing it well. If you could speak to that a little bit, what are the biggest challenges that people might have, like proper challenges or situations that multiple business owners might face, and what is your recommendation? What should they look out for?
So if you have got multiple sources of income from different businesses, it's really important you need to manage and oversee them all. For starters, you need to track your metrics. You need to understand the financials, all of your overheads, direct costs, your profit margins, your net percentage profit margins as well, because it might be the bank account looks great and you're happy. Probably not. You're probably stressed. Sure you are. But you don't understand. There might be one element of the business that's actually losing money badly. But you can't see it because the overall looks really, really good. So even just a simple thing like just removing one particular service or removing one product from your overall offering might actually, even though you're taking something away, you're actually massively increasing, perhaps not the revenue, but the profit, which is of course more important. So if you're already in that position, I'd just focus on really analysing what's going on, because a lot of business owners don't entirely know. You might have huge businesses with accounts departments. You don't actually know yourself on what's doing what. It could just be one bad leg on the table that's making the whole thing lean over. Whereas you can just remove that bad leg and it will actually stand a lot more solid. If you're getting started, then I would just recommend sticking to one thing and really building that up into a power position. Get it into a powerful position, make sure the revenue is good, the profit's good, and then look to systemize it as best as you possibly can. So that could be in the form of outsourcing. Personally, I think the best thing to do, and I had this amazing advice actually this week at one of my mentors' house, write down everything you do over the course of the week. I mean, literally everything, from even things like get out of bed, get dressed, brush your teeth, every single task that you do, whether it's personal, business related, all the way through till go to sleep. Literally every single thing. It might be a big long list, and do that every day for a week, and then label the tasks 1, 2, and 3. 1 will be only you can do that, end of. 2 will be only you can do that, but with some training somebody else might be able to do that. And then number 3 will just be anyone can do that. And you'll probably find that most of that list is number 3. What I'd then suggest is hiring somebody to do the number 3 tasks, because that will give you so much time. We do things that are just don't need to be done. And sometimes it's habit, because the mind, if even when you do train yourself, the mind will automatically just look to do the easiest thing, and they're the menial tasks that aren't making money. So if you can get someone to do the number 3 tasks, and then over time train them to doing the number 2 tasks, you can promote them, and then they can oversee the new person who comes to do the number 3 tasks. And by that point, you've just released, I don't know, 4 hours a day extra to do the things that actually matter. That's time that you can then use to build another leg of the table. But until you're at that point, you'll stretch yourself out so thin that you just can't. Some people might be lucky, but it's very, very challenging to start brand new ventures and build them up. Because I tried to do that. I've known several people who have tried to do that, I've tried to do that, realised, said I'd never do it again, and then 6 months later done it again. And that's
Yeah,
happened several times. That's just the way we all are. We're all wired to not want to leave money on the table and to try these new things because we're entrepreneurs. But it just doesn't work. And only in the last year or so, I'd say, where I've just focused on one thing, that's when it all moves forward. And yeah, systemization. And then, yeah, once everything's systemized, then I can take a step back and start really focusing on building up multiple BRRs, and taking on multiple properties, having several projects running at the same time. But for example, if I'm to do that now, trying to sell deals, people paying up front to go and look for deals, but I'm managing a project here and a project there, people are going to get disappointed. And in business, it's really about expectations. If people expect something from you, then you've got to deliver or over deliver. So
absolutely.
you can't, it's really difficult to deliver and manage the expectations when you're trying to do multiple things. As soon as you start letting your clients down, then that's when the downhill slide begins. And it might just be because of either greediness or over ambition, or just the desire to do too many things. It will lead to some sort of disaster or setback at some point. Whereas you can build a business, systemize it, and then focus on something else, then all the customers here are really happy. All the customers here are really happy. You're in the middle, extremely happy, because you're not having to split your time between 2 or 3 different things. And that's the most sustainable. Sustainable is a key word, I think, really. That's the sustainable way to build a business. And before you know it, you've got money coming in now, and everything's great.
I love what you said, and that is the reason, because I work with a lot of multiple business owners specifically. I know it's quite challenging to run multiple businesses. I'm one of those people myself, and sometimes, like you said, stretching yourself in different directions can actually be detrimental for the losses in your business. And I love what you described is like a whole system of first, because I think the majority of people, of business owners that have multiple businesses, struggle with the fact, okay, I can't hire more people because I have higher costs or I'm not generating enough money. But you said focus first, focus on your overheads, focus on how to increase the profits, and then think about relieving yourself and outsourcing it to other people, which I think is a fantastic way of putting things. And I know another thing that people struggle with is they're going to say, oh, it's going to take a lot of time to, let's say, train somebody to do the thing. What would you say to that?
The time's worth it. I mean, even with work, old work, for example, I decided to start training people to do some of the number 2 tasks, should we say? Maybe they went straight to number 2 rather than number 3. And it's well worth it. Yeah, it takes a little bit of time to spend hours with them, training them. But then, I don't know, a month or 2 later, when all of a sudden you're just overseeing something and the work's getting done on your behalf, all you've got to do is just take the moment to sort of assign a project to someone, check in with them once a month. That then becomes a lot less time consuming than actually, delivering the project yourself in this example. So it's definitely worth it. Obviously, hiring people is challenging in terms of taxation, PAYE, try and avoid that if you can. Try and just take somebody on self-employed, freelance, someone like that. Maybe Fiverr, places, those sort of websites are really, really good for this sort of thing. And yeah, you don't want to be employing people, obviously. It gets to a point where you might have no choice, but in the meantime, no. It's definitely worth it. Just obviously hiring and firing is a tricky game. It just needs to be someone that you can trust, somebody that is actually in it for the long run. It might be a point where you spend time training someone and they leave, and that's just unfortunately sometimes the way things go. But if you look after them and just make sure that they're happy, but still what's the word, unsatisfied, that they want more, then that'll be a good blend, because they'll keep on delivering for you and for themselves, and they'll be there for the long run. And then as long as you're going to retain them and keep them for a while, then the effort and the time that you put into training them is going to pay off massively. You'll have so much more time, and as you earn more and as you progress further, you realize that your hourly rate increases. And one way to look at it is, if I'm going to spend 1 hour doing this, but I'm worth, I don't know, this much per hour, whereas this guy here is worth this much per hour, then it just doesn't make any sense for you to do that task if they can do it. And it is definitely worth training people and getting them to that point. And that's where the systemization comes from.
Absolutely. And the biggest asset that we can have is time. Always. Not the money, it's the time. We cannot get it back. And yeah, it's just a case of like sourcing the good talent. And like you said, it's important that you check people, that they are trustworthy, that they are somebody that sees the vision that you see, essentially, for the expansion of whatever business you're doing and whatever they're helping you with. I think that helps a lot. But yeah, we're here all about taking care of your people, making them attached to what we do, and looking after them in such a way that they do not see a reason to leave, essentially, because they can see the progression, they can see the growth, they can see that they can grow along with the company, right? Along with your vision. So fantastic, fantastic, awesome, Louie. Right, we've been chatting for a while, and I know that we don't have much time, guys. By the way, if you are enjoying this conversation and all the other conversation, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to leave us a little review on the favorite podcast platform if you're listening on the podcast platform, or leave us a comment on YouTube. We would really like to know what are the main takeaways that you've taken from Louie and from today's conversation. And of course, subscribe so you don't miss any other episodes. We are going to be doing this ongoingly in season 2. We've got some incredible guests. So, Lou, with all of your projects right now, I know that you're doing amazing, and I know that you've got a lot of things that you can good things that you can offer to people. If you can talk a little bit about where can people find you, how can they get in touch with you, and what services or what help can you offer them?
Yeah, sure. So my Instagram page is quite busy. I like to do a lot of videos on Instagram, which is at slade.estates. There I talk about a lot of the property strategies that we're involved with, a lot of investment tips and strategies to help people who are either building a portfolio further or just getting started in property as well, just sharing that knowledge and experience. And also, especially from me, my construction background, to do with developments, the refurbs, all that sort of stuff. So just giving as much value as I possibly can to help people out. I've also got my website, www.slade-estates.com, where there's a further breakdown of what it is that we do, but you can link there from the Instagram page anyway. So essentially, I'm actively investing in property. We've got several strategies that we work with. We do rent to rent, so you can control the property rather than own it and still make really good tax efficient cash flow from that. So for example, my service accommodation unit in Canterbury in Kent is doing well. But like I said earlier, my background is construction. My background is project management, cost management. It's all about BRRs for me, buy, refurbish, refinance, and they're the ones that me and my business partners are looking at on completing and carrying out ourselves. But the main focus, like I said, for me now, and again, just on one thing, is sourcing deals for our investors. So whilst we're looking for our own, we'll also find really good deals. They'll be below market value. We'll negotiate, we'll secure them, we'll estimate the refurbs, and generally speaking, I'm very close to the actual builder's quotes with that because of my experience. And then we also offer project management. So we essentially give investors a hands-off experience to purchase a property. We'll manage the refurb and then help them with the refinance because we've got brokers in place for that, to the point where they can make their money most of the time, pull out exactly what they put in and be left with an asset that they can rent out. And it's a really nice feeling, obviously, taking a really rundown, damaged property, bring it back to life, and then obviously for the commercial gain as well, getting to keep hold of it and then rent it out so the refinance, the mortgage is covered. You've got a little bit of cash flow coming in each month, and you're just building your wealth by acquiring these properties. And also helping out the councils, helping out the country, because there's a housing shortage right now. It's a win-win for everybody. And that's what I've realized with property. When you do it correctly, everyone wins. And that is really the type of business you can possibly do. So head over to Instagram, slade.estates. You'll get loads of tips. I'm quite active on there. Been a bit quiet recently because we've had a lot of deals to carry out. But from next week onwards, I'm just committing to at least 2 posts a week, lots of value, and just helping our investors to grow their portfolios.
Awesome. That is awesome, Louie. Well done, by the way, on everything that you've achieved. So, guys, if you're into property, if you want to know the ins and outs, and also, I think what is very important, property is a relationships game. If you need contacts or if you want to know the ways of how you can acquire investors or contact several people or what to pay attention to, Louie is definitely your guy. He drops a lot of value, man, and I've seen it. It is just just if that's something that if it's the stage that you're at, to either invest or learn more about property, because that's something that really interests you or really excites you, go to Louie's links. Of course, as usual, they are going to be pinned down in the comment section, in the about section on YouTube, and underneath the episode on the podcast platform. So get yourself there, get yourself in contact with Louie, and up your property game. Awesome, Louie. Such a pleasure, man. Such a pleasure. I love listening about your successes. I love seeing you grow. And I know that you put your heart into it, like completely. You're one of those people that just goes there and does everything 200%, no questions asked. So I love that. I love seeing that. And I hope that it just grows from here, because, yeah, I love seeing what's going on. So thank you so much, Louie, for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I was going to say it's a very different conversation to what we had. It was actually about this time 3 years ago when we first spoke, and it's a very different place back then as well. So no, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, and you're right as well. Property is very much a people business. The property is the vehicle from which we earn money, but essentially we all earn money from property. The people are the ones that actually pay you. So you need to look after the people, and the property is just purely a vehicle, and each strategy is just a vehicle. It's really all about the people. So yeah, by all means, jump on Instagram, get in touch. We can always jump on a call. I'm happy to share some tips, happy to share some advice. And yeah, this has been brilliant. Thank you, Maiden. That's really been nice. Thank you.
Absolutely enjoyable. All right, guys, so that's it for this week. Next week, probably Ian's going to be with you again, or myself with another wonderful guest. So remember to tap that like button to never miss an episode. And thank you for being back with us. Or if you're new, hello. I hope you're enjoying Habits of Influence, where we discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly sides of entrepreneurship. We speak the truth. We talk about how it actually is to run a business. No BS, no hiding stuff. It's tough. It's super valuable. It's super, it can bring you a lot of accolades, right? A lot of success. And it definitely is something that is going to make you happy if you do it right. So that's why we're here, to hold your hand, to kind of be that support that we all need as entrepreneurs in our journey. So thank you again. And I'm going to be seeing you next week.